Everybody, and welcome to today's video blog. I'm here with my colleague Melissa Jones. So Melissa and I worked together at INSEAD. I was Director of Admissions at the school and Melissa was a senior member of the MBA team. And we're going to talk today about the INSEAD MBA admissions interviews. So Melissa, I know that you work with a lot of candidates prepping them for their admissions interviews. Can you tell us what you tell your clients about how the process works for the INSEAD interview?
Sure. Hi, everyone. So in terms of the interviews, there actually are no on-campus interviews with INSEAD. You'll be matched up with two different alumni in the city that you reside. So two separate interviews will take place. Now, generally one will be have a kind of a similar profile to yours, and one might be a completely different profile than yours, and one could be a little bit more senior and graduated quite a few years back, and one could have graduated just a few years out. So they try and do that kind of matching process. It's not always going to occur that way. There's over 3,000 alumni from their pool that like to do these interviews, so there's so much variability. And it also depends on people's availability. So that process may not in fact occur. It also depends on how many alumni are residing in the city that you are. Typically, the interviews they take place for about an hour, but I've heard of a lot of them just being about half an hour, or some have gone to 2 hours. And in a couple instances, I've actually worked with people that have had an interview that lasted 4 hours, believe it or not. They were obviously getting along really well and had a lot in common. So just make sure that you do have a lot of time prepared, ahead of the interview and afterwards, because you never know how long it's going to go. Or better yet, you could even ask your interviewer how long they might expect the interview to occur. So it is up to you to set up the interview with both interviewers. So you might send them an email or give them a phone call and find out a date that's best for them. You are given a specific time of when you're supposed to, or a maximum date of when you're supposed to do the interviews. And then in terms of where they take place, often they do take place in the office of the interviewer, or often they take place in a coffee shop too. So it really depends on the interviewer and the alumni.
Okay.
And in terms of, sorry, just one last thing about style, sometimes they can be a bit more formal, sometimes a lot less casual, or a lot more casual rather. So it also depends on the individual. So in my experience, I found that if an interviewer is a bit more senior, those interviews tend to be a bit more formal with specific questions, whereas if someone's a bit younger, they tend to be a bit more casual and a bit more conversational.
Yeah, absolutely.
So,
and then, sorry, carry on.
I was just going to say that that INSEAD itself, they don't ask the interviewers to ask specific questions. They are asked to report back on specific things, such as the main criteria that INSEAD asks for in a candidate, and then they report back to the admissions committee within 48 hours of the interview.
Yeah, so absolutely right. I mean, the school does give guidelines to the interviewers on how to conduct the interviews, but as you say, given the size of the alumni interviewer pool and 3,000 plus people involved in conducting these interviews, as you said, there's a lot of variability in the style and how the interview is conducted. So that's important to keep in mind, and quite a different experience for candidates versus interviewing with a school where it's a member of staff who's conducting the interview, and they probably have a very similar format for all of the interviews. Melissa, what are the typical questions that candidates will get asked by their admissions interviewer?
Sure. So you will definitely be asked about your current profession, as well as what you've done in the past. So this is usually the first question they'll ask, such as they do in a typical interview. So walk me through your CV, or tell me a bit about yourself. So this is where you'll get a chance to kind of walk through all the roles that you may have had, the choices that you made along the way. So why that industry, why that particular company, and then mention, the titles, the companies that you worked at, your major responsibilities, and any major accomplishments that you might want to throw in there, very briefly though. And then you probably want to spend a little bit more time on your more current role and talking about those responsibilities and an accomplishment. So you really want to rehearse this part as much as possible. This is kind of your elevator pitch. It's kind of a monologue in a sense. So I would keep it brief and practice out loud would be beneficial too. And then if you do feel that you have a bit of time afterwards, you could talk a little bit about your passions and hobbies and extracurriculars, but generally I would stay focused on your career. Another question that's commonly asked is about your career goals. So they'll want to know, why an MBA? Why now? And what are your short and your long-term goals? So you're probably going to want to come up with 3 to 5 reasons as to, why you want an MBA at this time in your life. And then definitely give a lot of details as to what your short-term goals are going to be post MBA, and then what your long-term goals are. So you've probably covered this a lot in your essays. So it's just reiterating that. Don't assume that they've read your essays. So definitely give as much detail as you can. If you keep it a bit vague, probably won't be as compelling. So try and get specific. What kind of role are you interested in pursuing? What kind of company and what geographic region might be of interest? And so really, I would give what's the passion for those goals as well. They'll probably also ask you about any extracurriculars or hobbies, passions. So this is also a great opportunity for you to talk about not only your maybe some sports or fitness related activities, volunteering, things like that, but also to show your research of the school. So let's say you really enjoy public speaking. So you could mention that, I really do enjoy public speaking, and I do it, on this occasion, and I'd be really excited to join INSEAD's Toastmasters club, something like that. Another question they often ask you is about your motivation for the school. So, why INSEAD? Why INSEAD over other schools? So you also want to come prepared with a few reasons as to why this school. What makes it unique for you? Is it the international network? Is it the alumni association? Is it like a specific class or a course, or maybe a professor that you're intrigued by, or a specific trek you want to go on, or an exchange? Or is it maybe it's access to either the France or the Singapore campus? Maybe you want to work in Asia afterwards. So this is really appealing to you to be in Asia, in the Singapore campus. And also, it's also common to ask, are you applying to other schools? And it's absolutely fine to mention that you will be applying to other schools if that's the case. Everyone knows that you're probably not putting all of your eggs in one basket, but what you do want to say is that INSEAD really is your number one choice over all the other schools. So that shows your motivation for INSEAD. And then a few other things that might come up too in terms of questions is your international experience. One of the key criteria for INSEAD is your international motivation. So you'll be asked, any particular projects you've done abroad, or if you've worked abroad, studied abroad, any interesting travel perspectives, that kind of thing. And also a main criteria for INSEAD is leadership, and that kind of goes along with teamwork as well. So they might ask you questions around, give me a specific time where you demonstrated strong leadership, or tell me about a time you worked in a group, or how you managed a conflict in a group setting. So sometimes interviewers will ask these situational type questions. So if you are given those kinds of situational questions, I like to give the advice to tackle it with the STAR acronym, which stands for situation, task, action, and result. So set the scene for the interviewer. So what's the situation? Then for the T is what was your specific task in that situation, and then show them what the action was that you specifically took, and then the result and the outcome of that. And I would definitely highlight a positive result and outcome for that. And then finally, current events can often come up. Not always, but I've definitely heard it. So I would definitely advise to keep up to speed on what's going on in the world. Read the newspaper regularly, get those news feeds, particularly in your industry. So if you are matched up with an interviewer that is in the same field that you are, I would probably bet on them asking you questions about your industry. So be up to speed on that. I was working with a client once when Brexit occurred, and they were asked about Brexit, and they were really quite surprised by that, and we're kind of bumbling through that. So because I hadn't really been up to date on how to explain or what their opinion on it was. So yeah, definitely keep up to date on what's going on in the world.
Yeah.
So those I would say would be like the top questions that I see over and over again.
Yes. Yeah. And as you say, I mean, there's a lot of quite predictable questions that come up, but also some unpredictable questions. And as we were saying, given the potential for variability in the format of the interview, with so many different people involved in the interviewing process and different perspectives and different ideas that they have about what they're looking for in a candidate, you need to be prepared for a question that's a bit left field, and just think ahead of time about how you're going to handle that situation if you get a question that you haven't anticipated.
That's right.
So it's it's sort of be prepared for the question that you cannot prepare. So then, Melissa, you work with a lot of candidates, as you said, for their interviews. What are some of your top tips that you share with your clients who are preparing for these interviews?
Sure. So my first key tip would be to prepare your key messages. So generally you should develop about 3 to 5 key messages and stay on message throughout that entire interview. So despite what the questions that you'll be asked. So these key messages are the most important point that you want to get across to your interviewer. So think of what your interviewer would want, how you would want them to remember you by, and what makes you unique from the next candidate. So you have to remember to match these key messages with the key criteria of the school. So that being leadership potential, international motivation, and your ability to contribute to INSEAD. So these key messages, they'll address as to why you're an excellent candidate for the school. So make sure you do have these nailed down and inject these messages throughout the entire interview process. So particularly with examples and stories. So another tip would be to anticipate potential concerns. So if you are concerned about a specific aspect of your profile, let's say it's the GMAT or something, lack of international experience. If you are feeling it, then they've probably spotted it as well. So be prepared on how you would handle those types of questions. Definitely a key tip to practice. I know that when you rehearse in your head or when you're writing things down, it doesn't come out the same way as when you're saying it out loud. So practice out loud, practice with friends or a colleague. At Fortuna here, we help people with mock interviews too. So that's a great way to get feedback as well. So when we do these mock interviews, we'll ask you a lot of sample questions and then provide a lot of time for feedback after that. Another key tip would be to research your interviewers. So it's so easy to do that these days. So just go on LinkedIn, look at their profiles, do a Google search on them, do a Google search on their companies, find out as much as you can about the interviewer. So you are coming in quite prepared, as well as you might pick up on some personal interests of theirs, and maybe they're similar to yours. So it could be a good talking point for you, and a good type of way to connect with them. Another final tip would be to come in with some questions of your own. So I would definitely not choose questions that you could find on the website. So ask them more personal questions, about their career, how INSEAD really impacted them. Why did they go into INSEAD? What did they take away the most from INSEAD? Maybe they can speak a little bit about the Alumni Association and how beneficial it's been for them. And then a couple final tips would be, definitely dress appropriately. This is a tough one. We get asked this a lot, and it really kind of depends on the person that's interviewing you. So just use your judgment. If it's someone coming from some corporate environment, you're probably going to want to wear a suit, especially if it's in their office place. If it's in a more casual working environment, I don't know, like Google or if you're meeting up in a coffee shop, maybe you might want to dress a little bit more casually, but definitely kind of a business attire, like a business shirt, not necessarily a tie in those situations. And of course, arrive early. Make sure that you're giving yourself plenty of time to get there, and just kind of give yourself a few minutes to relax, think about what you want to say before you go into the interview.
Great. Lots of brilliant advice. Thank you so much, Melissa. And thank you everybody for watching today's recording. If you'd like to connect with our team and discuss your application to INSEAD or your interview preparation, then please contact us via our website, or you can shoot us an email at info@fortunaadmissions.com. Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much. Good luck on your interviews.